Medical necessity might be a training issue with your crews. And we talked about ICD-10, and I showed you some of the ICD codes that are going to be out there, and they're a little funky, aren't they? Some of them are really amazing what the choices are of ICD coding. And we talked about looking at the process. So for you, from a billing perspective, when it's an emergency, hopefully you're getting your dispatch information. And then what you want to do is look at the patient's chief complaint. When they say none voiced, it's very frustrating, but hopefully they've given you something. And then the next thing from the ICD-10 perspective is the HPI. It's going to be critical that your crews give you that. And if that's the one message you can get out to them, HPI, the history of the present incident, what's going on now. Past medical history is always important, and if they assess the patient, that needs to be documented, because that's your ALS-1 that if it's appropriate, you want to bill. If it's not appropriate, you don't want to bill for it. Also, you want to be looking for what treatments they did, what interventions, anything that was unsuccessful. Remember, that's as important as the successful IV attempt or intubation. And with ICD-10, you are going to have 12 boxes to fill in. So, did this accident happen? Was it an SUV and a train? We had that happen in Philadelphia 2 weeks ago. Someone committed suicide, put his SUV on the train tracks, and an Amtrak train hit him. It was a paramedic, and there was a lot of information in the press about suicide among the EMS industry. But if you went to that call, that would be the train, on the train tracks, and it would be an SUV. And then whatever happened to the patient. What kind of an assault? Is this a fist fight? Is this a sexual assault? Is this a knifing, a stabbing, a gunshot wound? I said I'm from Philadelphia. These things happen. We have hospitals that are called knife and gunshot repair clubs because they deal with it so much. Was this a gunshot wound? Was this intentional? Was this self-inflicted? Was this in the result of a crime? Was this accidental? Bites. What did the biting? Where did the bite occur? The patient was in the woods deer hunting and got bitten by a raccoon. So the where is in the woods. The activity they were doing was deer hunting, and they got bitten by a raccoon on their left lower leg. So the lefts and the rights, the uppers and lowers, the where, the what, and the how. And you're looking in your coding, is this in the bedroom of a house? Was this in the bathroom of a dorm? If this was a highway, what kind of a road was it? Suburban street, city street, turnpike, expressway, overpass, all of that. That's specific information. You're going to be coding that. That's going to be in your list of codes. If you have not done it yet, go check your software company and see what they've got. Hopefully you've been doing testing with Medicare. Don't all say yes at once. So claims could be sent with ICD-10 codes on them and tested with Medicare. All right? How did the event occur? What kind of detail did you get from other people? And what body part? And remember, was it the left arm, and not just the left arm? Was it the left upper arm, the left shoulder, the left elbow, the left wrist, the left hand? Okay? One thing that you can do is you can take your top list of codes, maybe the top 20, 25 things that you code ICD-9 now, and enter that code and cross it over, enter it online, and cross it over to an ICD-10. You are going to find that some codes will be a direct cross, others will give you several choices. But take your top things now and start creating a list so you can see what you will most frequently be using. because when you take somebody who fell, you're going to have to explain what it is they fell from. Not that they fell 3 feet or they fell 6 feet, but how did they fall? Did they fall on steps? Was this escalator at a mall? Was this steps to the front of the house? Was this steps that were covered with ice and snow? Look at some of these examples for emergencies. Accidental handgun discharge. Edema of the right upper eyelid. Both of those happened in Philadelphia on a Saturday night. Activities involving animal care. Then you're going to look and see what kind of animal it was. Asphyxiation. Was this a patient that was see, that's what I meant by we used to just look at the activity. You would have coded asphyxiation before. You would have coded an accident that happened while the patient was swimming or diving. Now you're looking at asphyxiation because they were trapped in a car trunk. That's going to be part of your coding. Or asphyxiation because they attempted to hang themselves. Or asphyxiation because the baby got themselves all caught up in the cord from the Venetian blind. Or a plastic bag. That's what you're going to be coding with. And remember, non-emergencies are just as important, that you look at the total picture of what's going on. Why does the patient need an ambulance and an EMT? Hopefully it's clear to you what the EMT is doing there. And even if it's monitoring the patient was unable to adjust their own oxygen because they are extremely arthritic, and they have vision issues, or they have advanced Alzheimer's. 9 times out of 10, nothing is going to happen to that patient. But that's why you are there monitoring the patient. And you are also going to need to know what type of transport you're doing when it's a non-emergency. Discharge, dialysis, or hospital to hospital. And when you're going hospital to hospital, you're looking to see in the documentation, not that it was an upgrade in care, but why they left one hospital and went to the other. So if you have something as simple as contractures, need to know what kind of contractures we're talking about. Contractures of the upper and lower extremities, or contractures of just the lower extremities. And be careful when it's a non-emergency and oxygen. Emergency and oxygen is a completely different kettle of fish. You give oxygen all the time. It can help with pain, it can help with shock. Oxygen is an emergency intervention. It's non-emergency that becomes an issue. So here's this fella sitting in a nursing home or outside the nursing home, perfectly fine. Maybe he has Alzheimer's. Maybe he's a behavioral health patient and he could go cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Maybe he's somebody, see the dark glasses? He can't see. He could not regulate his own oxygen. Bed sores. These are staged, always. So you have a picture of stage 1 and stage 3. Here's what your choice is going to be from the coding perspective. Your choice is going to be, I need to know if this is a pressure ulcer stage 1 of the right lower back, or stage 2, or stage 3, or stage 4. Your crews are never, do not expect it. Hell will freeze over before this happens. You are never going to get the stage, ever, because they'd have to unwrap bandages. But the crews are the ones positioning the patient because of the pressure ulcer, so they certainly know where it is. And if they tell you where it is, then you can use the one in yellow to code. So it might be pressure ulcer right lower back unspecified, or it might be pressure ulcer of sacral region unspecified. You are never ever going to get the stage. It'll be a miraculous day if some nurse told them what stage it is and they actually wrote it down. Embrace it, buy them pizza. It's a good day. But do not expect it. It's not going to happen. All right? Now, we talked about Ralphie earlier. Ralphie had his eye. He was in the Christmas Story, and his eye was hit by the BB gun that he so desperately wanted for Christmas. Just the eye injury part, not the part of where this happened, because this happened at his residence in the backyard. Just the eye injury is going to be this complicated a code. And look at all the things that this one code will cover. Eye contusion, superficial eye injury, trauma of eye. And you're going to need to know that it was the left eye as well. This is just the eye injury. So see how ICD-10 is going to be multi-layered? All right? And again, look at all the parts of the body. So I told you about the ABCs. There's a ton of codes just for pain. There's a ton of codes, 286 of them for abrasion, 263 things that happen in a car. And what you were looking for and what you were going to be putting in your claim is this was a car where the driver was injured in a motor vehicle accident with a train, or it was a two-wheeled vehicle, or it was a pickup truck or an SUV. That's how specific you are going to be in your coding. Now these guys, I love these guys. These crack me up every time I see them because you just know where this is going to go. But even though the injury is described as abrasion or friction burn of other multiple and unspecified sites, you need to know the mechanism of injury. So you're going to need to know that this was a dirt road and an ATV was involved. That's what you're going to be putting on your claim. And some of these I showed you before. These, the mechanism of injury, and of course, overly amorous pets come back in all kinds of ways. So the where and the how. The where and the how is accident to, on, or involving an ice yacht. Then you tell me what happened to the patient in your claim. There's a lot of boxes to fill on your claim. When you're looking at a patient who fell on ice and snow, so this is a patient on a city street who fell on ice and snow, then you're going to describe the injury on your claim. So of course there are those spacecraft injuries that happen all the time, and you have to be careful that you know, was this something that happened because of a collision, a forced landing, or a routine crash, because there's a lot of choices. 71 codes for pain, 291 codes for problems involving pedestrians, which is different than problems involving autos. So again, look at where this happens, look at what happened, a school bus accident on a suburban road, a motorcycle that went into a field, that's your mechanism of injury. Here is a car that went into the creek, all of that, or your common kind of call, feigning syncope at church, and that's the patient who had some issue and went to church anyway. Hospital to hospital transports, make sure you know why you're leaving one hospital and going to another. There are a lot of reasons why you would leave one hospital and go to the other and would be covered. Now let's talk about Part A, because Part A I didn't talk about in any of the documentation sessions because it doesn't pertain to them. When a patient is within their first 100 days, the SNF may be responsible to pay for certain types of transports. And when you see that they were in their first 100 days, it's helpful to you. Here's the challenge. How do you find out they're in their first 100 days? So you know whether to bill the facility or to bill the patient or how this goes. This very often is a call intake issue. And we're doing a webinar on this soon. We're going to announce that we're doing a webinar on looking at call intake if you're doing non-emergencies, because it is a challenge. You don't want to ask too many questions. You want to ask the right questions. You can check online, and I know that you use all kinds of services. You use Trizetto and MDON and Availity and all the services to check online. Check and see what you can find out about if the patient's in their first 100 days. Medicare does not pay, it is the SNF's responsibility to pay if the patient is transferred from one SNF to another before midnight of the same day. So if they started at a SNF in the morning and in the afternoon they get shipped to another SNF, it is the SNF's responsibility. Dialysis transports and emergency transports are never a SNF's responsibility. And the easy way to remember that is a SNF doesn't have an emergency room. A SNF doesn't have a dialysis facility. They would never have it. That's why it is the facility's responsibility to pay. Transports to or from diagnostic or therapeutic facilities other than a hospital or dialysis, like an independent testing facility, some cancer treatment centers, are billable to a facility under the patient's Part A benefits. This is when your origin or your destination is D, or your origin or destination is P. There is a flow chart for determining when you pay when you bill Part A. And this is when you're doing hospital transports. This is not emergency, this is hospital transports. And the flow chart is provider number, campus, and patient status, inpatient versus outpatient. So first, and you go through this 1, 2, 3, you look at it, it's a 3-part test. So if the Medicare provider number of the 2 hospitals are different, then the ambulance service gets billed to Medicare. If the provider number of both hospitals is the same, then the next thing you do is look at the campus criteria. And somebody was asking, what happens if we go, and this was for a doctor's office, what happens if we go all the way through the facility and back to a building and behind? Well, that is one of the things that comes into play with campus. So if the campuses of the 2 hospitals who have the same provider number are the same, then the transport does not get billed to Medicare. It gets billed to the hospital. If the campuses of the 2 providers are different, of the 2 hospitals are different, then you go to the patient status. And campus means the physical area immediately adjacent to the main buildings, and buildings and structures that are located within 250 yards of the main building. We had an ambulance service once that called because the hospital was having them go around to another door to pick up patients because the hospital didn't want to pay, and the hospital thought it was more than 250 yards away. No, that was nonsense. They were just trying to pull something on the ambulance provider. I know, to go to all that effort. Patient status, inpatient versus outpatient. If the patient is an inpatient at both facilities, and the facilities share the same provider number, but they're located on different campuses, then the transport does not get billed to Medicare, it goes to the provider. And all other combinations are separately billable to Medicare: outpatient to inpatient, inpatient to outpatient, and outpatient to outpatient. There are Part B services that get billed to Medicare: emergencies, dialysis, CT scans, and so forth. What the challenge is for you is that your facilities get creative on what they are and are not willing to pay for. Or they get creative on what they ask for, and they ask for ambulance. They just want an ambulance. Or they think they won't have to pay if they send it in a wheelchair, or it's cheaper to send a wheelchair, so they don't want to pay for that. What you have here is an education issue. The education is twofold. And this might be out of your jurisdiction. If you're doing non-emergencies, there might be a marketing guy, or there might be a facility rep who goes around. And educating facilities goes on non-stop. Because guess what they have? Turnover. And just as soon as you get somebody who's really good, and you can send your bills to them, and they're good about getting the PCS to you, and all that good jazz, guess what happens? There's turnover. So educating them is an ongoing issue. So that's the staff level. The second level has to do with compliance. And when you are getting pushback from your facility, and they want things that you know either aren't kosher to give or are going to screw you in the process, you have to always remember they are your customer, but you need to do things right. So the way to handle that is to get beyond the routine people that you usually deal with and get to either an administrator or their compliance officer. And when you speak to a facility compliance officer and you show them what you have in black and white, the best approach is always to say, well, these are what we understand the regulations to be. Is there something that you have? And when you have a facility's compliance on your side, whether it's hospital or nursing homes, then that will filter down. So sometimes you have to go to a different route to get paid by facilities to make sure that things are done right. And the other thing you want to tell the facility is you understand that they're responsible to pay for some things, but they're also your customer, and you don't want them to pay for anything more than they have to. That you're protecting their bottom line. And when you bill them, you need to be prompt in pursuing them. All right? I had somebody call me Actually, I took a call at lunchtime, a client in another state, and what happened is they had a patient who came to a city hospital from about 150 miles away, and now the patient was going to be discharged, and the patient wanted to go back home. And the question is, well, doesn't the patient go to the closest appropriate? Why isn't the patient, how can we take the patient home? Isn't that like too far? It's 150 miles. And the answer was that Medicare will pay for the trip to the hospital and the return trip as long as it's medically necessary. Now, the fact that the patient was 150 miles away was because they had such a funky health issue that the closest hospital that could take care of them was a big city university medical center. So the patient was taken 150 miles to this big university medical center. Well, Medicare will pay for the return trip home as long as it's medically necessary. If this were something as simple as the patient went from a SNF to the hospital, they would pay for the trip back to the SNF as long as it was medically necessary. Okay? So whether it's big, or small, they will pay for the transport as long as it's medically necessary. But if you're going big, like a lot of miles, there had to be a good reason why they went to that place in that facility in the first place. Did you know about the prior authorization for the PCS form? Did you know that's coming? Can I tell you how bad it is? It's not only bad, it's god awful. They put a demonstration project in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and South Carolina. This was for repetitive transports, and what CMS believed is, look, if we put this prior authorization model in, we'll ensure that people are in compliance. You gotta have your PCS, you gotta have your trip reports, you send it to us, we'll authorize it to you. We'll get it back to you in 10 to 15 days, give or take, and there you go. They started it last December. New Jersey closed 22 services. The first patient that died was in New Jersey. The second patient that died was in South Carolina. To say it was not smooth is an understatement. What happened is patients that had long been transported by ambulance for dialysis, when the dialysis, because guess what, they approved nothing. When the ambulance service said, look, I just can't keep transporting you. I've already done like 15, 20, however many trips. I can't keep transporting you. That's what happened in New Jersey and South Carolina, and 2 patients died. There's a fellow that I've worked with for a long time, and he says those are the 2 we know about. State ambulance associations, New Jersey and Pennsylvania, fought ferociously, and they were working with Novitas. That's who this demonstration project started with, and the problems still continue, but it has improved somewhat. But CMS is like, oh boy, we have a demonstration project and we now have prior auth. So it has been declared that this is expanding as of January 1st, 2016. It's going to Delaware, DC, Maryland, North Carolina, West Virginia, and Virginia. But effective January 1st, 2017, all states. Everybody in the country is going to have a prior auth. And this is part, you know, the doc fix bill, you know, the bill that was passed in April that protected our reimbursements? Buried in there. That's where this was. The idea is they want to protect the integrity of Medicare, and it's helped to improve compliance, but it's going to be a tough go. So stay tuned over the next year to this and what's going on, okay? Because you're going to need to be on top of that change if you're doing any repetitive transports. In addition to expanding prior authorization, Health and Human Services has decided to increase the incentive rewards for people who report Medicare fraud. And they're going to extend that to Medicaid fraud as well. So they've declared that Medicare has to improve their education outreach and teach more people about improper payment